is 6 hours, so I just assumed that UK was 6 hours too.
Yeah.
I actually got a little mixed up there.
Yeah.
That's I guess the beauty of time zones. I mean, I'm not even looking forward to it this weekend. So I don't know if you're a big soccer or football fan or soccer fan at all, but I'm a pretty big Juventus fan, and they play in Italy.
Okay.
For everyone that doesn't know, I guess. But they got a game, I guess, around 12:30 Italian time, which is 6:30 a.m. here, Toronto time, I guess. So that's the struggles of being a fan of European sports, living in North America is.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same for us living in European time, trying to watch the Super Bowl at 2 a.m. It's like,
I never consider that, I guess. Yeah. And then I don't know what it's like. I mean, tried to watch as much as the Australian Open as I could for tennis.
Yeah.
I would start at, 9:30 p.m. at night, which were okay. And then, there's other games, like both the semifinals were on at 3:30 a.m. and there's just no way to do it. But that's the beauty of sports, that it's so kind of international and transcendent, that you have people on opposite sides of the world watching the same event. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And, we're both kind of in a bit of the sports psychology field, but just kind of on that topic, one thing that always sticks out to me is not only the sports psychology of athletes, but the sports psychology of fans. And I was kind of thinking about it, that when you look at a sporting event and you think about the nerves and, and the anxiety that athletes feel, I bet you there's some fans that feel even more nervous or more anxious than actually athletes themselves.
Definitely. Because you have that thing where you can sit there and watch this game and all these scenarios play out in your head and you have all the time to like stew over what's happening. Right. Whereas the athletes are just in the moment doing what they can. So you can almost guarantee that you're significantly more anxious trying to work out what's going to happen next, when the athlete's just sat there being like, I'm just going to play this next pass. I'm just going to do this next point, I think it's worse for us spectators a lot of the time, actually.
That's one thing I've tried to kind of focus on for myself, even as I get more and more involved in the sports psychology field and learn more about different strategies to apply with athletes. I try to apply them to myself as a fan. And I do find myself getting a bit less angry at things as they go wrong on the TV. Obviously it's not perfect yet, but it's just interesting, just the whole dynamic of, sports psychology and just how much fans just get so super attached to games. And I think it's just really, that sense of community they like the competitiveness, it could be a whole different bunch of factors, but it's just really, really interesting when you think about it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I saw that we kind of talked a bit before this, but one of your, certifications is Certified Master of Simplicity, which is quite a unique title. I haven't heard something like that before. What kind of was involved in getting up to having that certification, and what are the main applications of it?
So it wasn't anything massively strenuous. It was done through a guy. He's a sports psychologist, or at least he was. He now works more in kind of the business side of things. And this whole system, it's like a framework basically, to be more, to keep things simple and to just improve little by little every day, basically. And all it took for me to become this Certified Master of Simplicity was to basically attend a course for, I think it was 2 days.
Gotcha.
It was extremely intensive. We spent pretty much all day. We basically did it on ourselves, and then we learned how to do it on other people. And it all came about because he worked with Olympic swimmer. His name was Chris Cook. Unfortunately, I can't remember how many or when he got some gold medals, but I'm fairly certain he got some gold medals for the breaststroke in some Olympic games. And that was when the system was developed before he got those golds, and it kind of proved that it worked. And it was rolled out to other athletes and then businesses. And there's like a big lawyer firm that used it, and they got significantly better. They increased their, revenue, is it? Increased something to do with law. I know nothing about law firms.
Yeah, but, neither do I, so we're in the same boat.
They increased something to do with law firms, and it went very well. So yeah, I was really interested. And then it's only really him that's developed this system. He's got a book out about it and stuff like that. But he kind of rolled this out and was like, we want to give it to other people. So then there was like me and 5 others that did this course, and allowed us to teach it to other people. And it's just basically a simplicity framework. It's putting things down to their kind of smallest form, their simplest form, and then making it into something that you can improve on. If that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does. And I think that's I think a really important value for people, not only sports psychologists, but everybody to kind of grasp. There's that, I guess, old saying of like paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
Where there's so much information. I find that myself, I mean, not really related to sports psychology in a way, but I'm always kind of looking for like the best productivity systems or workflow systems to keep track of all my tasks and stuff. So I end up downloading like 10, 15 apps, a week and trial them all and everything. And you just get so sucked into these complex systems. And I think for some people, those complex systems work well. But there's the other side of the spectrum where, the simplicity works well. And it's really easy to get sucked into so much information and get paralyzed by it, which I guess where the saying came from.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. When it came to this swimmer, he was training really hard, and you get really deep into the numbers of swimming because you can look at, all the different splits that you have and all the different timings and how fast you are on that turn and all those sorts of things. And like you say, you can become so ingrained in the different data. But actually what he's done with this is turn around and go, you don't need to look at that. And the approach itself is called the 2 lengths of the pool approach, because this guy, Chris Cook, was like, what do I need to do as a professional swimmer to compete and to win gold medals? And that wasn't actually his goal, but his goal was to be the best that he can. And it just turned out that he got a gold medal from it. But his kind of why he was doing it and what he needed to achieve was 2 lengths of the pool as fast as he possibly could. Mm-hmm. And it really is that simple. Because if you think about it with a tennis player, it'll be, to score as many points without creating errors as I can. It's all about how simple you can make it, and then providing a kind of a platform to build off of that effectively. Yeah.
So it seems really just like a really, simplistic way about going about goal setting. So that,
very much so.
Yeah. I think that has a lot of crossover between athletes and business, which it's dawned on me more and more that a lot of sports psychologists or performance psychologists also kind of have a side gig, or they split 50-50 with, businesses and try and get their performance up to speed.
Yeah.
It's all about goal setting. I think you kind of have one long-term goal, and how do we now kind of break this goal down into little sub steps in order to achieve it and make it seem, I guess, more realistic.
Yeah, sorry. My dogs are getting a bit mad. So yeah, I mean, exactly like you say, people will turn around and can get really into something. And then as long as you have the right goals and you're focused on the right things at the right time, you're going to make progress. And that's what we all want to do, because people are people, aren't they? Like whether you're in a lawyer firm and you're trying to, push yourself to be the best you can and get a promotion or whatever, you're going to feel the same anxiety as someone going out onto a pitch does. We're all human beings, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of, in my own experience with setting goals, I've tried to experiment with 2 different approaches, and I'm still kind of, I guess, experimenting and seeing which one is the kind of best fit for me. But I always kind of look at if I should create deadlines for myself or habits, and deadlines in the sense that, by this Friday, I'll do one thing, and then by next Friday, I'll do another thing, and have kind of goals like that, or habits in the sense of, here's a daily task I'll do. Here's a weekly task and a monthly task. And that kind of really where I found that was really helpful for me. Not so much, I haven't really applied it too much in the sports psychology world, but when I was going through my master's program and writing my research thesis and stuff, there's so much to keep track of, and you have deadlines really, that it was almost a mix of both I kind of employed, where there's a deadline you got to meet. So what are some daily, weekly, and monthly habits I can do to meet that deadline?
Yeah. I think the big one for me when I think about goals is the process versus the outcome. Because obviously, if you don't know anything about sports psychology, you generally tend to process. You generally tend to think about the outcome. You go, I want to win this game, or I want to win the league, or whether it's business, I want to get this many clients, however many things you need to obtain or sell, etc. But then if you think deeper about it, the outcome is what you want, great, but how are you going to get there? And the process is the most important thing. And that's a big thing about this approach as well. If the goals that you're setting for yourself, because it is basically, like you say, it's a goal setting framework. It's just made it extremely simple and to follow. And it's kind of the minimal gains idea, a bit like, I don't know if you follow cycling at all, but the Team Sky, a few years back kind of made this thing when Bradley Wiggins won the Tour de France. And it came out that they were looking at kind of they called it marginal gains, minimal gains. You to the point where they were bringing their own mattresses with them to different countries in order to sleep better. To get that 1% better than someone else that you're competing against. And I guess it helps because you get 5 different keys. They're like the 5 most important things you have to do in order to improve. And then you just set goals from those keys that are, how can I improve by 1.1% sort of thing. And then, you just kind of go from there. And having trialed it myself, it went really well for my undergrad. My undergraduate degree, but now that I'm kind of getting into the sports psychology thing more, I'm definitely going to use it again because it is so useful. And like you say, some people do like the analytical side, the really detailed bit, but I'm definitely someone that prefers it more simple, just kind of black and white. This is it. This is what you got to do,
Yeah. The whole process versus outcome thing was interesting. You brought that up on, because a lot of my consultations and stuff that I do with athletes, we focus a lot on being process focused versus outcome focused. Because we work with a lot of hockey players, and often hockey players, they'll judge their performance in a game based on how many points they scored or if their team won or lost. Whereas, you could be doing all the little things right, skating really hard, being in the right spot, knowing the plays, all that kind of jazz. You can be doing all those things right, but still not have points, for example. Or you can kind of be doing all those things wrong and get lucky 1 or 2 games and still get points. So we always try to shift the framework, I guess, for athletes to be more process focused and judge their game based on that rather than outcome focused. And that's kind of, I guess, a really nice tie into what you were just talking about there, about the whole kind of setting goals and everything, looking at the little steps that lead up to the outcome rather than just the outcome itself.
Yeah. Because like you say, if you just focus on the outcome, more often than not, it's going to be based on luck, whether you actually get there. But if you fall in love with the process and just do the process, then, the outcome's going to come from that regardless,
Yeah. Another thing that I like to tell them too is when you're being process versus outcome focused is sometimes, I kind of just mentioned it there already, but the right process can lead to the wrong outcome.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes the wrong process could lead to the right outcome. Those are some of the outliers. And it's interesting how those 1 or 2% occurrences that we call them outliers, that's where we tend to put all our focus towards, not the 95% of, things that go the way they're supposed to go kind of thing. So it's interesting, the mentality of athletes. I think it comes from maybe kind of a bit of an obsession of being perfect and wanting everything to go right, that even those 1 or 2 outlier percentage points just have so much value to athletes. They focus all their attention on that. Yeah. It just comes, I think, from just wanting to be perfect. And I guess really wanting to be perfect is tied into just the pressure of being an athlete, really.
Yeah. No, I kind of relate to that on a personal level, because when I was younger, I used to play a lot of sports, but the worst one for me was golf. I used to play golf and I used to get really, really angry at the fact that I wasn't playing well. When in fact, I just played a shot that wasn't exactly where I wanted it to go. It was still on the fairway. It still landed on the green. Just wasn't 2 feet close to the hole. It was 4 feet, and I'd lose my so-and-so. I'd totally go mental. I'd flip off. I'd be like, I can't do this anymore. But I focused solely on the fact that it didn't go exactly where I wanted to go, rather than the fact that it was still a good shot. It just didn't quite work out,
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I'm feeling right now with tennis. I just picked up tennis maybe about a year ago, and it's the same thing. I was so obsessed with having the perfect tennis shot. Someone like, trying to emulate someone like Federer or Djokovic and having their exact form and having their exact same pace. And it's just impossible. And every tennis shot is unique in and of itself. So I really, what I've tried to do to not be so judgmental on myself was I picked up this book. It was called The Inner Game of Tennis. I forget the author's name, but there's a really cool exercise that they talk about it, where you imagine kind of a scenario of 2 tennis players. So player A and player B, and then the umpire. So player A, say that player A hits an error shot. So player A thinks that's a bad shot or a bad outcome. Player B thinks that's a good outcome for him or her. But the umpire just sees it as a missed shot, just calls the shot for what it is, right? There's no value attachment to it. So what I really try to do now when I play tennis is I don't try and look at shots as good or bad. I try and look at them as I want that shot, or I don't want it, or I like it and I don't like it. Just try the subtle ways to take the judgment out of things, because I feel like that's a pretty good first step, at least for me personally, to, not get so obsessive that every tennis shot has to be 100% perfect down the line and with your opponent, no chance to get it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And, tennis, I feel like it's pretty similar to golf, where it's not really a team sport. And I think that just it's a different kind of pressure, I would say. Because in team sports, I think there's a kind of a notion of pressure where you don't want to let down your team. That's not apparent in I guess, single player sports. But in single player sports, there's just so much pressure on yourself, I feel, because the outcomes are almost directly related to your performance. There's no blame to shift onto anybody else, or the coach didn't call the wrong play, or your lineman didn't block, or whatever the case is.
Yeah. Well, I think you're definitely more vulnerable to being a kind of obsessive perfectionist when you're an individual athlete, because you're the only person that's going to keep you accountable. Like you said, in the team, you've got someone else, and you often do it for that other person or other people. And you don't want to let them down, but you haven't got those people in an individual sport. You've got to do it yourself. So you have to push yourself, and that means that you're going to want to be perfect all of the time. I think that at least makes you more vulnerable in that kind of area. Because I know I did a kayaking race when I was younger, and it was like 3 days worth of kayaking, and the only reason I got through it. It was ridiculous. It hurt so much. The only reason I got through it was because my friend was in the boat in front of me. Like, it was me and him in one boat, and gotcha. I was only paddling because he was still paddling, and he told me later on that he was only paddling because I was still paddling. And it's that kind of dependency on someone else that you can push yourself to keep going. But when you're a tennis player or a golfer or a boxer, you don't have anyone else left to kind of rely on. It's just you. So you're going to want to be more perfect because, like you say, the outcome is solely based on what you do a lot of the time.
I mean, I'm not really familiar with kayak racing. Is a 3-day kayak race like normal? Is that a normal length of a race, or is that just like a super event, a marathon?
It's a bit more like a marathon type deal.
Gotcha.
I think in the Olympics, the kayaking is like sprint kayaking a lot of the time. So you've got the white water where they have to like do some crazy stuff in a really fast flowing river. They have to go through certain gates. It's a bit like a ski slalom, but on water in a kayak. Mm-hmm. And then the sprinting races on the kayaks are more kind of really, really narrow boats, and they have to go as fast as they can from point A to point B, sort of thing. Whereas this one was it was horrific, honestly. Yeah. It was 3 days.
3 days of it. Yeah.
It was 3 days, and you had to kayak. Oh, was it 4? It might have been 4 actually. You have to kayak a certain distance each day. So it was like 30 miles, 32 miles, 36 miles, and then like 18 for the last day. And you had to do it, you got timed for it. And then we weren't racing to win. We were just racing to survive almost. And I got a shoulder injury on like the end of day 2. So that last day was horrible, but it's one of those, if my partner had stopped, I would have stopped. I wouldn't have been able to motivate him because I wasn't motivated either,
And vice versa. If you stopped, he was going to stop.
Yeah. If I'd stopped, he would have stopped, and it would have been a nightmare, but we didn't stop. So we got there in the end.
Yeah. It seems like, between the golf and the kayaking, I'm not sure if you played any other sports growing up, but you kind of had a lot of exposure to some of the mental struggles that athletes go through at maybe a younger age. Was that some of your motivation for getting into the field?
Oh yeah, good question. It's exactly the reason why I got into sports psychology. Because that kayaking race was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And it kind of, I did sports psychology without knowing it. And then I learned about it because I had a mantra. Because when you're kayaking, it's extremely repetitive. So I got a repetitive shoulder injury from doing the same movement for like 7 hours a day. And then you kind of, as I was paddling, every paddle stroke would be a word. So it'd be like paddle in the water, pull, and then out the water. And every time I do that, I'd say keep. And then on the other side, it'd be keep going like that. And I just did a mantra because it just helped. And then I was like, I really like that kind of coping strategy side of things. What is that? What was that? So I did some research, and I found out about sports psychology, and then it kind of exploded in my head. And I was like, yeah, this is all I want to do. That's it. I'm done. Yeah. I found my career. I found my goal. That's it. That's what I'm going to do at uni. That's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, sort of thing. So yeah, we're still here.
Still here and still working. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. That's kind of a similar experience to myself, where kind of growing up and being an athlete, I think it's inevitable that you deal with some sort of mental struggle. I don't think any athlete has never had a mental struggle. That was kind of the influence. And then just kind of my passion for sports in general, has really kind of just really taken my grasp or my attention really in pursuing the field even further. And even more recently, really the emergence of esports as a validated field of sports or athletics. And then there's just so many opportunities now for, esports mental performance consultants and esport performance coaches and stuff like that. It's really interesting when you think about it that, we kind of start off at traditional sports as sports psychologists or sport performance coaches. And now it's kind of bled into esports, and it'll be interesting as time goes on. Maybe there'll be like VR esports psychologists, or it's pretty interesting when you think of the timeline of progression of the field.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a thing recently, because I'm quite into esports myself. I think that's an area that I'd at least like to get into if I possibly could. And I saw a thing recently that said, like you say, with the kind of progression of sport. So where are we going to go next with the VR and the introduction of artificial intelligence and things like that? But I heard a thing, I don't know if you saw in the news recently, the 2 marathon records have been broken fairly recently by Kipchoge, and I forget the female's name, but she broke it as well. And they were both using Nike Vaporfly shoes, which are supposedly like a technological form of doping, basically, because they got like significantly more power from the sole of the shoe pushing them on or something crazy like that. And it's an interesting thing in terms of where sports going to go. So, esports is on the rise, and we're definitely going to see more kind of esports competitions become more mainstream. The one for Fortnite was like millions of pounds, wasn't it? Millions of dollars.
Yeah, I think it was like 4 million American dollars, I think was what it was. So whatever that is in pounds. Still quite a lot.
Still a lovely amount of money. Yeah. So it is only going to grow, because kids nowadays love it. And as we were saying, doing sport from a young age is what kind of leads people onto our career choices and other ones around the sports field. I mean, it's crazy to think about where sports going to go. And there was a TED Talk. It was a TED Talk years ago, but it was still relevant now in terms of the times. Like Jesse Owens, the sprinter, he was running on like a cinder track in the Olympics where he just smashed everyone. In Germany, and he was running on the same track. If he was running on the same track as Usain Bolt with the same shoes and blocks, etc., he'd only be like a third of a second slower or something ridiculous. So as humans, we're not developing all that much. And the same with sport, like it's not developing all that much, but there's still kind of little increments. And esports is like a big explosion. And then you've got like the Vaporfly shoes that are going to start to really kind of kick off everyone's running. It's really interesting to think about where that's all going to go, what new sports there are going to be, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, especially the huge explosion of esports. I can't remember if it was maybe a 13 or 14-year-old kid that won the Fortnite tournament, I think, and he won like $4 million, for example. Like when you put $4 million in the perspective of other athletes, I mean, sure, if I look at there's obviously, the top players in the pro leagues, at least here in America, they make, upwards of $20-30 million a year. Yeah. But the average salary, I would suspect, is probably well within, $4 million. So you have a kid that literally just won a video game tournament, making the same amount of money as, an NBA or NFL player makes per year. And that's, just kind of all on the sense of, just the pressure that people feel. It's really different, I think, for when you consider a pro athlete getting $4 million a year and having all the hype and fame that comes along with that. And you compare it to a 12 or 13-year-old that gets $4 million a year, all the hype and fame about that. It's pretty interesting. I just was speaking, I did a podcast interview recently with a guy here in Toronto. He's an esports kind of mental performance consultant. He specializes in esports. And we kind of were talking back and forth about, when you think about pro athletes, for example, we'll take, a Premier League football player. They've been at the top end of their sport their whole life. They've kind of been in the spotlight, especially in Europe where there's so much, youth teams and academy teams. They're kind of always in the forefront. Whereas when you think about esports players, there hasn't really been that light shone on them. Yeah. In the early stages of their life, they're kind of more reserved. They kind of just play at home, really, right? It's just recently they get media exposure. So it must be super, super tough, I would feel like, for somebody in esports to make such that, drastic transition between just playing in my basement, playing Fortnite in my basement to winning $4 million. It's pretty crazy.
That's the thing with the tournaments as well, though. They're not, they go from their comfort in their own home of playing this game. And then they have to, for these competitions, they often have to travel somewhere else. And, it's to make it fair because, the signals often differ. And if someone has a worse signal than someone else, then it's not fair, etc. Mm-hmm. And can imagining going from your house where it's really nice and comfortable and going to a thing where there's like a big crowd and there's other people next to you playing the same game. And it's just you, a screen and a controller or whatever you use. Mm-hmm. It must be so kind of daunting to turn around and have that kind of environment when, like you say, you've been kind of used to just being at home, being safe, being comfortable. Yeah. You're just thrown into this mixing pot of thousands of people shouting at you and everyone can see what you're doing. And it's just like, I personally wouldn't enjoy that, I don't think. No. But if you win $4 million, then maybe I would. Who knows? Yeah,
that's a decent kind of consolation having gone through that $4 million.
Yeah, I'd take that.
And kind of how we kind of start off the conversation about talking about simplicity and setting goals and stuff. I think that if people are able to identify beforehand certain events or situations that cause some anxiety or cause some fear or whatever it might be. Then to set some goals and how do we kind of, expose you to those situations so that once you finally get to like the pinnacle of it, like for instance, a child or a kid that, is scared about playing on stage in front of thousand people, let's set goals or, deadlines or habits, I guess, whatever you can do in order so that when you go on stage, it's less daunting, whether it's like, streaming every day, putting your face on the TV screen, or the computer screen, or going to smaller events and playing, working your way up. I think that's kind of a really nice tie-in of how you kind of do some work there with the whole master of simplicity thing of setting, realistic and simple goals and kind of that stuff is helping people overcome fears and setting goals of overcoming fears, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. It amazes me how quickly you can make progress when you set the right goals for you. Mm-hmm. It's really incredible to turn around and say, okay, I'm going to do this. And it can be the smallest things. Like personally for me, I'm trying to lose weight at the moment. I'm starting to set goals that are I'm going to eat between this time and this time, and I can't eat anything else outside of these times. And it's already working, and it's crazy to me. And it's same with this. I found it with a guy. I did the 2 lengths of the pool, this master of simplicity thing. I did it with a guy who worked for Mercedes F1, still works for Mercedes F1, who have won the last 3 or 4 Formula One championships. And that's a really intense sport. That's a really intense environment to live in. Yeah. And although he's not on the front line of that, he's he gets the parts for the cars. He's responsible for getting all the parts in for the cars. And I did it with him for a while. And he said, the improvement that he showed in his own personal development, also in his work as well, is just so huge. And that's the thing, if you want to do it, if you want to improve, if you set the right goals for yourself, literally the possibilities are totally endless. There's nothing you can't achieve. I absolutely love that about sports psychology because, with your help or someone like my help in your consultancy business, you can help a hockey player become significantly better than they were before over a period of time. And that, to me, that kind of real change is firstly really important, but also really incredible as a concept. That's just an amazing thing for another person to do. It just blows my mind. That's why I love sports psychology. It's why I'm still doing it.
Yeah. No, I never really thought about that for the Formula One. The Formula One team, I guess, is how much pressure the kind of pit crew, I guess, is under. Because I only started really hardcore following Formula One maybe the past 2 seasons. Yeah. And with my Italian kind of heritage, I obviously just cheer for Ferrari. So that's why I'm the biggest fan of Mercedes. Because they just kick their butt every game. I mean, I think, what was it last year? Mercedes won the first 9 or 10 races. It was just crazy.
Yeah. Dominating. Yeah.
Yeah. But really, when you think about it, the pit crew, they are under immense pressure of doing these, super, super complicated behaviors or super, super complicated tasks in, 2 seconds, really. You only have 2 seconds is the ideal time, I feel for a pit stop. Red Bull has that nailed down to a T. Sometimes they even get sub 2 seconds, but just the amount of pressure. And again, it's weird because that's a task that's a super quick in and out. You're kind of sitting there, you can't really warm up for it in any way. You're kind of just sitting there as a pit crew, just watching the race. And then I guess the chief guy kind of calls it in that it's time for a pit stop and you're up and going. It's almost like, I mean, I'm not going to try and compare the importance of a pit crew to a fire station, but it's almost like firefighters where they're kind of hanging around and everything. And then all of a sudden they get a fire call and they're off and going. It's that split second, mindset shift of being relaxed to go time.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is amazing. I mean, like you say, we talk about sometimes the people watching often have it harder than the athletes, because the athletes are hopefully in the moment completely and just dealing with what they have to deal with. Whereas it's the other people that have to think about it. And I can imagine being a pit crew person, you'd probably get a little bit of anxiety about the next pit stop, because what if it goes wrong? What if I don't get my wheel on within the right time? And we've all seen it when it goes wrong. It does go drastically wrong, and it can lose races because it is a sport of seconds and milliseconds,
literally.
The pressure is high, and it always amazes me to see that kind of thing, like you say, to turn around in a second's notice and just do a job without any mistakes whatsoever, no mistakes allowed, and to just turn around and do it. It's just
that has to come. I think that has to come just from a kind of a place of just the task being second nature, just through thousands and thousands of hours of practice that literally they almost probably just go on autopilot. They're doing. Their body their brain just takes over their body, and they just kind of do what they got to do without even really thinking about it to a certain extent. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. The one last thing I kind of wanted to mention, you mentioned it a bit, and I thought it was really interesting, where you kind of, I think you mentioned something to the effect of it's pretty it's fascinating how much the human mind, I guess, could change, or how much performance can change in such a short amount of time. Yeah. I think it comes from a place of, I think as humans in general, especially athletes, I think they tend to underestimate what they can do. You give them a goal to achieve. And I think a lot of people underestimate themselves on whether or not they can achieve that goal. Oh yeah. Which is kind of, I guess, another piece of evidence of why I really, really like your work as a master of simplicity, to really, really break down those goals and, make them, I guess, seem realistic to the individual. Because I mean, the goal in and of itself is already realistic, but their perception of either themselves or their past history of trying to set goals for themselves not going so well. I think, just kind of as an end point, that athletes typically underestimate how much they can do. Yeah. So I really think it just kind of exemplifies the importance of sports psychologists, of kind of guiding them through the goal setting process, and making them, I guess, their dreams reality, to not be too cheesy there, but I mean, that's the thing. People, I see it on LinkedIn a fair bit now, but people often think that you need sports psychologists to fix something, but that's absolutely not the case. You can have a sports psychologist when nothing is wrong, and you'll still improve. It's not about just fixing an error that's an issue that's occurred. And with the whole underestimate yourself, I think it's almost human nature, isn't it? You just kind of, everything you do, you just doubt yourself, and you don't think you're quite the right person for the job, or you have a lack of confidence. And part of what's so amazing about this approach, this simplicity, is kind of it gets you to focus on the right things. So you pick the 5 most important things that you have to do to improve. So you're focusing on the right things. And then that gives you confidence, because you see that you're improving little by little, because you set these tiny goals. They're not massive. It's not like I'm going to suddenly increase my the speed of my serve from 90 miles an hour to 110. It's not going to go up by a huge amount. It's kind of increasing the technique, the process. And then once you get that, you get motivation, because like everyone, if you're good at something, you want to do it more. And you get that motivation, you keep doing it, and then you start to really enjoy the kind of the discomfort, the challenge of doing something else, because you've got that confidence behind you, and then you kind of take off. And that's where I think it lies. Like you mentioned, the underestimation of people when they think that they're not as good as they actually are, is the potential there to create someone that's significantly better is so high, so high. And that happens for everything. That happens in business, that happens in sport. And I'd be willing to say, some of the best athletes over the generations have been the ones that have, had the confidence and have just taken off with it. Because, people like LeBron and Kobe and all that sort of thing, is you just get the feeling that even if they've had struggles, they've always been confident in their ability. And then you've got people like Nick Kyrgios,
who could be incredible and is an incredible tennis player, but you just get the feeling because he kind of throws out the window with his actions and his mindset is often wrong. And you kind of get the feeling that he's just maybe lacking a bit of confidence in himself. And it's kind of almost a way of shutting that off by just kind of acting out and being a bit, rude, I suppose is the word. Yeah. But yeah, it's amazing. It's incredible to think about what people can do if they just unlock that kind of the confidence to not doubt themselves and just go for it, you know? Yeah.
And one really important point that you mentioned more towards the beginning of that was how sports psychologists aren't there to necessarily fix something. I like to just kind of use the term a coach rather than psychologist, because you're more there as like guiding the athlete and just coaching them rather than fixing. I guess it's the old saying. I mean, I'm terrible with old sayings and the, saying them verbatim, but it's that saying where it's like closing the barn door after the horse left kind of thing, as like solving the problem. Like you're doing what the solution is after the problem happened. I think it's very applicable to sports psychologists and athletes, or just mental performance of athletes in general, where just because everything's going well doesn't mean that you can't benefit from some sort of intervention or some sort of mental training. Yeah. It's about maintenance and keeping those skills high so that it decreases the likelihood of a drop off later on, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I find a lot actually in terms of because people often misjudge, like we we're mentioning, people often misjudge sports psychology as something you need in order to fix a problem or something, because half the time they won't even know that there's something they can improve on, because they won't learn about imagery or self-talk, and they'll have maybe heard about it, but they won't have any idea how to actually do it. And if you get taught, then it could benefit you massively. But then you can turn around and also say, well, these athletes can turn around and say, well, I think I'm fine, but I don't know. And actually just talking about, and I found that with people on this 2 lengths of the pool approach, just talking about why they're doing it and really putting it into like the simplest terms. Why do you do it? And then what it is you need to do and what are the 5 most important things. Just talking about that in itself, not even doing any intervention, not even mentioning mental skills, just talking about what the 5 most important things are can provide like so much clarity to someone that's maybe a bit muddled up in what they're doing. But if they go, okay, the 5 most important things for a tennis player are to get enough practice reps, get enough sleep, eat well, all that sorts of things. However you want to rank the 5 most important things, just thinking about that in the first place could be a massive benefit to someone that just hadn't thought about that way of going about it,
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a great kind of nice little point to end off on. I know that it's Friday evening for you over there, and you probably got some dinner to eat because you just got home from work. So thanks for kind of rushing on here to come on. And
no, thank you for having me.